fellow commissioners. So I think this is it's a thing. There's a lot of questions still for us around the regs, the process. I do have to say, Sean, you and I have talked about this extensively. And I know that you, myself, and Bruce talked a little bit about it in terms of the operations of what it looks like. What's the process? How, what comes first? And I know you all have been walking us through it. And I know, again, we've talked about it publicly as well. I think for my fellow commissioners, you all know that I'm a sort of like, where's the training manual for this job, right? There's no manual for this job. There's no manual for commissioners to say, oh, here's the process. Besides you going on YouTube and looking at, old footage of the regs, and the process. And obviously, I think the commission staff and you all have figured out sort of better ways to do this. So I guess my suggestion is it would be good to have a more thorough conversation on the process and the operations and what does this look like, sort of like a map out version of what we are anticipating. Because I think what you're hearing, I think the frustration, not frustration, but just us asking questions, even though we've talked about it a little bit, is that we've never been through it. And I think what happens at the commission, we all know this, is that everyone's getting ready for public meeting. There's a hot topic, everything turns to the hot topic. And then we don't have all the information that we need to sometimes go into things. So, from a training perspective, and we all learn differently, I think we need to sort of put this on the agenda for next month to sort of like air it out a little bit amongst us, right? Because Sean, you're the traffic cop. You're having these conversations one-on-one with us. We're all these smaller conversations. It would be good to have a conversation. I want to hear what Commissioner Roy has to say. I want to hear what Commissioner Concepcion has to say and how we move along in this process so that we understand going into the reg process, also what our fellow commissioners are thinking, because we don't have the opportunity to do that due to the open meeting law. So that's just my piece. Commissioner Stebbins, I see your hand. And Commissioner Concepcion also had her hand up, but Madam Chair, I pass it back on to you because I can't call on people.
Sure, and again, I would agree with Commissioner Camargo, and I've been late to the game, and I think I'm the only commissioner who has actually not, been engaging, in this process, and I have not even, been able to make any suggestions for regulations. So I am very, very late to this process. Commissioner Stebbins, and I would appreciate exactly what Commissioner Camargo is saying, because I have a lot more catch up to do than everyone else. Commissioner Stebbins, and then Commissioner Concepcion.
Can I request that I go first? I'm sorry.
Oh,
Yeah,
sure,
go
please.
ahead,
I'm sorry. I saw his hand
Thank
up
you.
first. I apologize.
First, to our executive director and general counsel's credit, I know that we've had these conversations. I know that there was a presentation that was given about the anticipated process, but it would be helpful because maybe I'm not, I thought what we had agreed to was a little bit different than what is happening now. And maybe we just need a little bit of a refresher about this going forward. So I think that's a good suggestion, Commissioner Camargo. I wrote down 2 thoughts just because I want to make sure I clarify some of the requests that I have. So I mentioned that overlap, and I want to make sure that when we do receive the information, we can see, first off, identifying which departments have identified the topic. I think that that's important. And I think that would also give us the ability to understand if there are multiple departments that are identifying the same issue. So those are the only 2 things that I just want to make sure when we do receive this information that that's seen, because it sounds like each department, like licensing and enforcement, so on and so forth, have given their list. But I would like to know, what they've identified as well. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you again. And Commissioner Stebbins, again, my apologies because I've sort of stepped out of this role for about an hour now. So anyway, Commissioner Stebbins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just to maybe wrap up this conversation. It's an important conversation that we've been having. It certainly has found its way into several of our meetings. First of all, I'm happy that we have engaged staff. I've said many times that the concept of opening the regs was kind of a unique terminology for me, based on my last position, and the fact that many of the changes we found later in the maturity of our agency were were brought forward by staff who were really seeing how things would play out on a day-to-day basis at a really granular basis. So I want to make sure that as we've asked them for their recommendations, their ideas, that they don't necessarily get set aside or put to the side just based on some kind of informal working groups. I want everybody to feel they have a chance that their question or their idea is vetted appropriately and obviously raised with the commissioners. And again, then we need to adopt the policy and move forward. I think what would be helpful for me, and maybe we can add this to our November meeting agenda, because there are two pieces I think that are helpful. First, a process that we're obligated to follow by law and by regulation in terms of, and where I'm coming down on this is, we know what we have to do by November 2023. I think there's a category of items related to that deadline that we need to kind of begin to build back from, right? We need to know, and there's a full regulatory process behind this, when things need to be out, how long they need to allow for public comment. So I think at our next meeting, if we could just kind of revisit for everybody's education what some of those timelines are, I think that would be helpful. As well as have a conversation amongst ourselves of, once we bring a policy or an idea forward, or we adopt a potential change to the regulations, what is, and this might fall to Matt and our communications and our kind of external stakeholder team, is thinking through how we can go ahead and conduct that. And since the five of us have not been through that before with this group, it would be great to hear your ideas in terms of public comments, regional hearings and things like that as part of this process. So again, kind of two buckets. What can we do to make this a process that's really engaging and make sure that input is not discounted from anywhere? And then secondly, what are those required timelines that we need to follow? Because I do think it's important. I don't want to tie us to a calendar, but I think with the things that we know we'd have to do by November of next year, we got to begin to build back some of those dates so that we meet the regulatory requirements. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thanks. And Commissioner Roy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a question. Aside from the ministerial and conforming changes, as commissioners, when we submitted our lists, we were asked to rank them in order of personal importance, how we'd want to address them. And I'm wondering if the staff ranked them so we know what's of more importance to them, if they were ranked in any way, either based on department or so we can really address those issues if they are of more urgency than other issues. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may.
No thing. I was just turning it back over to you.
Thank you. So the staff lists are more of just a compilation of topics. So for instance, I didn't rank mine. The reason I did ask commissioners to rank them is so that in order of importance, I understand which topics you want to personally dig in on. So in other words, if all five of you identified social consumption, being that that's the slide we remain on, it would allow me, if social consumption was top on your list, but it was fifth on someone else's, that may help me engage a commissioner, but also let the other commissioner know, because it wasn't your top, knowing that at any time, two of you can work on an issue, but three of you may not. It was mostly to manage the open meeting law implications for that. Not to suggest that we won't get to a topic, but instead that we could prioritize it accordingly based on your individual preferences. So staff have the ability to work across the entire spectrum of issues. So that was the tactical effort there.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Sean. And so in the interest of timing things, I think that we can move this to next month. But I also, again, I wanted to give everyone an opportunity, to chime in, because again, as we noted, the open meeting laws preclude us from being able to have some of these conversations with all five of us at the table. So again, while this has been a long time, but I think it's been helpful. But Mr. Director, and again, I know that I've looked at it, but how many more pages are here? What do you think? I mean, because I want to make sure that I am cognizant of time, biology, and hunger. So, we may want to go to a lunch break, and then we can, take a 15-minute break later. So I just would ask your input on that, how
Sure.
much,
I can,
and we should indulge you to be able to move as quickly as possible while making sure that we have a full conversation.
sure. Heard. Let me, let me offer one final comment on this item, and then I have one more item to address. It can be as brief, it may provoke a conversation, so I want to be sensitive to that, but my introduction of it at least will be brief nonetheless. And this actually responding to Commissioner Stebbins' point. Haley, if you wouldn't mind kind of going to 3 slides forward. I think it's slide 22 in the deck. So we've contemplated this, the stakeholder engagement, especially. We've talked about it throughout the entire process. It's also something this agency has done throughout its entire history. And again, I describe it in the last bullet here as historic and prospective, which is meaningful stakeholder engagement early and often. Further, we indicated in this slide, we will continue to meet with commissioners to discuss this process. We will absolutely do that. And then lastly, I just wanted to flag that we've actually surveyed our staff that participated in the previous rounds and engaged them in such a way that said, what did you like about previous processes? What did you wish you had going forward? And one of the kind of the more common themes we heard from that is, I wish I had time. I wish I had the space to do it. I wish I had the bandwidth to do it. And so those are things that are all being baked into this process, that have been baked into this process and will be baked into this process. So I appreciate that that's a continued sentiment amongst the commission as well, and a continued priority. I also want to share with you that it's shared by staff as well. And so that is our kind of evergreen commitment as how we conduct our business. So I just wanted to flag that. And I promise I didn't feverishly type this slide in the background while you were discussing. This was here all along. So in fact, it's a relief that I think there's alignment there. The next and final update from me, actually, there's a few other things that I can motor through.